Pure green room. It's our VIP lounge.
Franklin's got
You're on
his
that side.
VIP lounge.
Yeah, right.
All right,
Where's
well,
the-
I guarantee the white
garlic
seats
tape
are
on the floor? Where's
the
that?
best ones. The black ones are a little
Therapy.
harder on the butt.
Tape.
But we'll get started here. So thanks for joining us for our first in-person session of the Global Entrepreneurship Week. For those that I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, my name is Cameron Law. I serve as the Executive Director here at the Carlson Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, and we're excited to steward this week of events. And just so you know, we're joining a global community and celebrating Global Entrepreneurship Week. So we're not the only center or region celebrating it. So we're joining over 200 countries around the globe. And then actually here in the region, I think we're fourth in the nation for number of activities that are going on throughout the week. So I'm excited about all that's taking place. And this is our first in-person session. We had a virtual one earlier, and then later tonight we'll also have a session. So feel free to continue on, but we want to recognize our sponsors. So Western Health Advantage, probably actually 5 years ago, actually 6, I apologize, invested in the Carlson Center to ensure this week continues on. So they started endowment to help us run programming, and then also our prize money that goes towards what used to be called Spark Venture Competition, now is an angel investing event called AngelCon, which will take place on Wednesday. So we're grateful for their support. We also have our unicorn sponsor, Moneta Ventures, which is a local venture capital firm. They invest in SaaS-based businesses and based out of Folsom. And then we have our angel sponsors, SMUD and Sandhill Global Advisors. Franklin's here. Feel free to check out his booth. They have very good mints, I've heard. So if you have a stinky breath, we'll be sure to grab those mints. But they got notepads and a bunch of other things. And Franklin's a great partner. So if you want to learn more about their seed program, I highly recommend checking it out. Lastly, our startup sponsor, Roseville Venture Lab, and we have an amazing set of partners that help us put on this week. So feel free to plug into the rest of the week. And with that, I'll turn it over to Thomas Hall and Gary Simon, who will be leading the charge for our discussion on CleanTech. So take it away, Thomas.
All right, thank you very much, Cameron. Thank you for those of you that came today. I'm Thomas Hall, the Executive Director of CleanStart. And one thing I love about this week is if you went back all the partners that are involved in Global Entrepreneurship Week and helping and supporting entrepreneurs here. So CleanStart, we're the ones that try to focus on clean energy, clean tech, climate tech, sustainability. And we've been working at that since 2005, back when Gary Simon, the founder, worked with SMUD and the city to create CleanStart. And since then, we've been working to build the region as a clean tech hub, to have 10,000 careers and $5 billion in revenue in industries that have defendable IP, not just resellers, but companies that are really making an impact in the climate transition. So first off, let me adjust the slides. So, there's obviously myself and Gary Simon. If you guys want to scan this, you can learn more about some of the programs that CleanStart has to offer. But today we're going to focus on investing in clean tech and getting investment. And initially when we started giving this presentation, things were very different. On a constant basis, there's business cycles and there's also political cycles that really impact investing in infrastructure, the residential space, computers, the impact of AI. That's going to have a big impact on the demand for energy, which in turn impacts the energy transition. So we tried to bring our presentation up to as current as we can make it. And we're going to highlight some of the ways that you can go and get ready for funding right now, because we're in a slower business cycle with an adversarial executive branch. And we're also going to highlight where you can still find potentially grant funding to be able to develop your clean tech idea. So you have an idea. All right, now what do you do? How many of you have been through Cameron's entrepreneurial toolkit? It's a great thing to go through because what's the number one reason businesses end up failing? Any guess? They can't find a customer. So it's customer discovery, value proposition, and as we like to put it, if you're trying to get your company funded, there's 3 T's that you have to master, and you can master through that business model canvas, and that is traction. Can you prove that it works with people? Can you get traction with your customers? Team, why would anyone invest in you? What are you doing to make sure that you have a robust team that fills maybe the parts that you're missing? And technology. Improving your technology to make sure it's the one that's addressing the traction and the customers is critically important. So right now, while things might be a bit slower in CleanTech or not look as optimistic, there's still a lot of things that need to be solved. And there's still going to be investment in those areas all across the world. So focus on your technology, focus on getting the traction and building the team so that when things start to potentially come back or people start looking to invest more, you're ready to get some of that investment. Next, I'd like to welcome Gary Simon up to the stage.
I'm probably not going to step up there. So at any rate, I'd like to know why you're here. So what's your interest in being here today? What would you like to learn about?
Grant opportunities. I'm going to start up for EV. We call it EV Opti with EV charging stations completely.
Oh, okay. So I've answered one of your emails. And so we're going to have a meeting with you pretty soon. So you just got to get on the website and pick a time. So at any rate, your name?
Michael Johnson.
All right. I'm Gary.
Nice to meet you.
John.
Yes, I'm John Goldberg. I'm a business advisor with the Small Business Development Center, so I want to know everything that's going on in business in Sacramento, and especially CleanTech.
All right.
I'm Carter Wells, and I just have an interest in the area and don't have much experience from understanding.
Okay. Back here behind Cameron.
I'm here to learn about the grant opportunities for CleanTech in general and also for EV stations to see what opportunities are.
Okay. And here?
I'm Robert Cordova. John and I are working on simpler shipping process. So we're just looking for maybe grant opportunities or how to leverage our skills.
Shipping of what?
The boxes.
Of buses?
Boxes.
Boxes.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. And you're?
So I'm here with Robert. My name is John Page. So the boxes that we're talking about shipping, there's a ton of cardboard that gets delivered to your house when you order through Amazon. I can't tell you how much they bring down boxes. So what we're doing is creating a reusable box that folds down, so actually be sent back to the sender so they can reuse it to post that loop.
Okay. Very good. I think you were at one of our first weekend Techstars, whatever they call it, hackathon. Were you back there 5 years ago?
No.
Okay. All right. We're just going around and finding out who's here. I'm Gary, and you're?
I'm Yvette, and I'm with Data Checks Visual Business Reports, and I'm looking for opportunities to create visual reports for renewable energy companies.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. So let's talk about what's going on. Oh, I'm sorry. I missed you. American Railroad Cogeneration.
That's why I want to either sell it or find somebody else.
Okay.
Haven't gotten on it.
Okay.
Okay.
Very good. All right. So, and back here.
Well, I'm gonna have to do hard knocks. And there's a crash course again this past year. And it's gotta be, I'm doing a research in creative writing of business, just gotta be tolerant and sometimes I feel like people take my ideas all the time for my research and development. They want me to be a second advice on a life. I want to do contracts with people I've been writing letters to and do a diverse corporation beauty contracts. And I have friends in bookstores and movie theaters and we're still trying to do the research and development. That's why I get ripped off sometimes.
Yeah, well, but
They don't have a warrant to search my app, and that goes for wiretapping and kind of thing.
well, there's a big call for people with skills to know how to write grants.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So, and it's an art. Some of it is kind of stupid, but you just got to learn how the granting agency thinks. So.
I gotta go hard knock. They just get a crash course this past year.
Yeah, well, That happens. Okay, so next slide. Okay. Here's some news that I sure think would come as a shock to you. After November 5th, federal contracts and grants are a lot harder to get, not only in clean energy, but in a lot of other areas. So somewhat, it's how do we pull ourselves up and move on? So, quick quiz. How many billion-dollar clean tech companies are there in the Sacramento area? Any idea?
No idea.
2. One of them is called Infinium. The other one's called Origin Materials.
Startup companies, there's only.
Yeah, they started up here and now they're a billion-dollar company. One thing that's nice about being a billion-dollar company with customers is they're not particularly worried about that. Their focus is on their customers and how do they get more and more business from them and how do they get more and more profitable. Well, that's an amazing thing. What's the other characteristic of those two businesses? They started the same year we started, 20 years ago. So if you're wanting to start a clean tech business, patience is required. All right, particularly if you have a physical product, which they both do. You can talk about apps, you can talk about all sorts of software that have a low cost to get started, low cost to get the revenue, and one of the highest failure rates in all of business. The only thing that has a higher failure rate than software-based companies are restaurants. And for some of the same reasons. Because if all you got is software and somebody comes up with a, halfway decent, better idea, then walk across the street and go to that. If you lose your key software developer, who was the genius in all this stuff, it's like losing the chef in the restaurant, So they move on, maybe take a lot of customers with them. So if you want to build a business with some staying power, you've got to have some staying power up front. Sounds like you have some staying power trying to work on your project. Okay, so we have come out of a condition which we called the green tidal wave. When Biden got the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act passed, there was just an enormous amount of money pointed at clean tech. Grants, contracts, incentives, in the country as a whole, it aggregated to over $2 trillion worth of money. But that's not got a whole lot more legs with it. Mark, how are you? And so you have to think about where do we go from here after getting knocked down on the 5th of November. So the tax incentives, they're popular with Republicans because it focuses on business. I can't say that all of them are going to survive, but probably a lot of them will. There's going to be a period of confusion, and we're already in it. Who's going to be the Attorney General? My guess is not going to be Matt Gaetz. So who's behind Matt Gaetz? Who's the next guy? Trump has asked the Senate, when it reforms on January 3rd with all the newly elected senators and with a Republican majority in the Senate, to immediately adjourn and go into recess. Why? Because if you appoint a cabinet officer when the Senate is in recess, there are no confirmation hearings. And they're immediately in place and can do things. Well, 30 Republican senators have already said there will be no recess appointments. So they're obviously unhappy with the names that are being put forward. So amount of confusion, how's that going to work out? Who's the next one? If you are already in the process of trying to get a grant, or you want to get in on the tail end of the green tidal wave, You've got a window that you can apply in now before everything collapses around you. And I don't know how long that window is going to be. The first thing we have to get past is, if you will remember the news, Congress only passed a short-term funding bill for the government that expires December 15th. Okay, so Congress is going to have to act to keep the government open past Christmas. And they're already talking about the possibility of a shutdown. And Trump says he welcomes a shutdown. It will save us a lot of money. But every time the Republicans have shut down the government, it's just incredible stress and chaos on everybody in the country. So I don't know whether Republicans are going to go along with that or not. If they shut down the government, a lot of the things that you could do between now and the inauguration, a little bit beyond, won't be possible. So you got to look at some other things. So how about investment? Well, even before the election, investors were getting sour on CleanTech. And why was that happening? Well, I just described it. It takes 20 years to get a company up and going and very profitable. And both Origin and Infineum are still struggling to get fully profitable, even though they've gotten market valuations of over $1 billion. So it's a tough business. And investors, they want it back fast. If I can't do it in CleanTech, where else can I do it? I know, artificial intelligence. Okay. In the investment world, this is known as the next shiny object. Okay. They're very fickle. And the minute somebody has some success in an area, everybody rushes towards that. Right now, everybody's rushing towards artificial intelligence. What are some other things that they rush towards in the past? Hydrogen, solar panels made from weird materials, electric cars, a lot of money went into. And now it's electric airplanes. A lot of money went into that.
Boats,
Boats?
electric boats.
Electric boats?
Big
Well,
ones.
you know, maybe Elon will have one of those.
He does.
Oh, great. More reasons why I hate that guy. But any rate, right now you're in the doldrums a bit on the investment community, because people are kind of tired of hearing a lot of the same old stories. Oh, you've got an efficiency product. Oh, well, you know, great. You've got another electric vehicle product. Oh, wonderful. But, you know, we're shutting down the funding for EV charging stations. We're probably going to try to hose the federal tax incentives for people buying electric cars. And for God's sakes, we got to stop killing the whales with offshore wind. So a lot of that stuff is going to get in this morass of, you know, what in the hell is going on? You know, windmills cause cancer. And how's that ever going to get straightened out? So they want to see more traction and proof of sales if you want to go to investor. Now, Infineum and Origin recently got hundreds of millions of dollars of more investment because they came in with a story that basically says, I have more demand than I can keep up with. Can you give me some more money so that I can convert that into sales? And I'll show you it's already profitable because of the sales I'm already making. You can get a check for that. But it took them 20 years to get to the point where they could make a check for that. But if you want to get money from investors, you've got to find a way to be in that category of, I have more demand than I can keep up with. I will come back to that in a minute, but a lot of that is spending more time figuring out who your customers are and what they want. Thomas talked about the 3 T's. A startup business almost universally, particularly in CleanTech, will spend most of its time focusing on which T? Technology. Everybody thinks the solution is, I got to make my gadget do more. Tell that to my wife and the big remote for the TV. She still doesn't know what all those buttons do. And I still get phone calls during the day saying, okay, It's now showing me stuff from Humana that I don't want to see. How do I get out of it? So it's not always about the technology, but it is nearly always about customers, traction. How do you figure that out? That's cheap to do. You ask a lot of questions. Now, there's a few bright spots. Something that most people haven't turned to recently, but they're still out there. There are foundations. There's in fact one called overlookedgreencompanies.com. And they literally look for good ideas that people have overlooked and put into it. Yes, sir.
What stages are those companies usually at that are getting funded for those foundations?
Pretty early. I mean, again, you got to have a good customer story, but this is more like philanthropic money. They would be thrilled if they ever saw a dime back, but they're not thinking about that as their motivation.
So is it essentially crowdfunding for CleanTech companies?
No, it's applying directly to the foundations. And so we'll show you a way to do that. This thing called the Open Grants IO, Sadal Terboski. But they're out there. But the population of them is small. Okay, so everybody's having these kinds of ideas. I'm just trying to give you an idea that maybe not everybody is onto yet. So Sadal knows where some of that money is. Grants from states. And here's a really great bright spot for California. We have a lot of grant money coming in through the Air Resources Board and the Energy Commission and a few others like air pollution control districts. Why? The Energy Commission money comes from a tax on your electricity bill if you're in an investor-owned utility area, so PG&E. How much money does that give to the Energy Commission each year to give away? $300 million. Okay, so it's amazing because it's a tiny little charge on each of your electric bills. But when you aggregate it over the state, and you've got 15 million customers, a little bit a month money per month starts adding up. So that's a lot of money. The second big source in California, and maybe we should just go to the next slide, is the Air Resources Board running the cap and trade program. What's cap and trade? We set up a system years ago, more than 10 years ago, which says we don't want to emit any more than this level of CO2 from some big industries that we're targeted. So if you as an industry are contributing to being above that target, you have to pay a penalty. If you're below that target, you can get an incentive. So if you can figure out a way to lower carbon footprints, the ARB will pay you money for doing that if you apply for it. How much money does the ARB collect by selling offsets, or what they're actually doing is collecting penalties from those that are emitting too much carbon dioxide? Anybody got a guess? How much money per year? More than that. Right now it's $4 billion a year. So
But
that,
isn't Donald Trump going to try to go to war with Governor Newsom to get rid of that?
he can try, but I mean, it's a state program, and Mr. States' rights.
That's right. But
So
the federal government, the federal court system is going to be a key.
it will be, but this has been tested in the courts before.
But the time span.
Time has gone on, but again, if it's going to the courts, it might be 2028 before it ever gets to a decision.
Yeah.
So it's there now. The other thing in the state is called the low carbon fuel standard. So apart from industries emitting too much carbon dioxide, there's a standard now for how much carbon needs to be in the fuel in order to achieve the state objectives in reducing carbon emissions in total in the state. So again, the ARB sets a level, which is the neutral point. Can't have more than this amount of carbon in your fuel. You got more than that, you pay a penalty. You have less than that, you can get a credit. How much money is being collected on penalties on people missing the low carbon fuel standard? Take a guess. You failed before, so try it again, Mark.
I have no idea.
Is that right? Oh, come on. It's California. Oh, my heavens. I'm giving a speech right now. Okay.
Phone a friend?
Yeah, phone a friend.
I say you're
Yeah, right. That's one way to do it. No, $3 billion. So in total, there's $7 billion a year coming through the ARB. And they're highly incentivized to spend it. They want to see carbon emissions come down. But you have to learn the ins and outs. You got to learn the ropes of going and getting that money. You kind of have to see how they phrase it. You need to write grants telling people it's all about, how this is going to lower carbon dioxide. And unfortunately, when you get that big a bucket of money sitting in the state, what happens? Well, fraud. Yeah, that's minor. What's the other thing that happens? Legislature, what do? Yeah, there you go. So some of this money is earmarked. 25% of it has to go to low-income housing projects.
Or does it have to benefit low-income communities?
It says low-income housing projects, I think. It might be more generous than that. But at any rate, that money's earmarked. Can you come up with a project involving what you want to do that somehow benefits low-income housing? You can get into that earmark. Okay, what's the other big earmark for this money? Climate change, what? Well, don't say it. I'm trying to be politically correct here. What is it? What kind of transportation? Mass transportation. Which mass transportation? Trains. Which train? High-speed rail from Merced to Fresno. Okay. Probably there's no more federal funding for California high-speed rail. So the 25% earmark of state funds out of the cap and trade were there to provide the match to the federal funds. It's a head scratcher what happens with that money. But 25% of $4 billion is still $1 billion. So somehow they're going to have to figure out what they want to do about it. But yeah, big buckets of money like that attract politicians like flies to you know what. So, they just can't keep their hands off of it. So that $2 billion, or that $4 billion reduces to $2 billion of things that are freely available now. The ARB has put out a whole program as to what they want you to spend the money on. If you want that money, and you should, you need to look at the 259-page document, which tells you what kind of projects they're looking for. You want me to memorize it? Oh, I think it's in the slides at the end here. We'll get to it, but it's called the ARB scoping plan. Okay? All right. So you can look to the states to get some of that money, and California isn't the only progressive state that has buckets of money like that. Colorado, Oregon, Washington. They have some of the same mechanisms, cap and trade, low carbon fuel standard. They also have other incentive programs. Okay, those are all three other democratically controlled states after the election. So you can try to look for projects you can do there. You can look to Massachusetts, you can look to New York. You're on the wrong coast to do that. So just bear in mind, they like home teams. But you're pretty well positioned anywhere in the West if you can do that. So look there. The other thing is bootstrap, bootstrap, bootstrap. What does that mean? Anybody know what bootstrapping means? Yes, sir. That's a bad way to do it. What's a good way to bootstrap? Sell something. What could you sell? If you don't have a product right now, what could you sell? Pardon? The MVP, you could sell what you've already invented. but you're all smart people. Consulting. Okay, find people out there. You might even run across a customer in your customer discovery that says, oh, that sounds really good. How soon can I have a product? Maybe you need to go back to them and say, well, why don't you give me a consulting contract? And you have identified a problem, and I need to know more about that, and you need to know how to perfect the solution for you. Pay me to find out more how my product would solve your problem, and you own the result that I'll give you. Consulting is a heck of a way to bootstrap. Do not mortgage your house. Do not, except in rare circumstances, go and try to crowdfund money. Okay, that just gets you into a whole lot of legal trouble that you may not be prepared for. So that's not free money either. So bootstrapping is using your wits. And you could go to a company that's a potential customer and say, can I partner with you? Or you go to a competitor and say, my product will make your product better. Let's enter into a joint venture, or let's enter into a contract where we'll co-develop the product. So bootstrapping is a lot about being scrappy. The other thing is, if you do have customers that are out there on the rim and they really want your product, go back and ask them for bigger deposits. Okay, there is a danger in asking for deposits from customers on a product you've never produced, because you may fail. Legally, you owe them the money back. So watch out asking for deposits on a product that's not ready for market. But it can be done. In my history, trying to turn around companies, I've asked for 100% deposits, but I knew exactly what we had to build. We built it 1,000 times before. I knew what it cost. I gave them a discount, and they gave me 100% deposit because I was the only one in the market that could fill their need, and they knew that. It's great to have a situation where the customer says, I can't live without your product. So if you've got things like that, they'll help you. So spend more time discovering what customers might be in that position, and then ask them for larger deposits.
Or LOI. I was just advised to get LOIs, letters of intent,
Yeah,
in order to get the money, to get investors to.
but I think they're advising you to get Firestarter. You could probably get a pretty good fire going with those LOIs. They're pretty meaningless. So what you want is a purchase order. You want somebody that specifies how many, how much price, what's the delivery date. Letter of intent says, if you happen to actually finish your product, come around and see me and we'll talk about whether we're going to buy it. That's why they're not real valuable. There are pitch competitions out there, and we've just got one coming up this week, part of GEW, up at the Growth Factory. I think there's $100,000 in prizes being given out on that. There are big ones across the country. Rice University in Texas puts on one of the biggest, and it's specifically for clean energy business plans. So they have $500,000 million of cash sitting in the prize bucket. CleanTech Open has a number of big prizes. So one of the startups that we've worked with and took through our class, that individual has applied to 10 pitch competitions. He's won money out of 7. He paid attention to the class. So I don't think he in the aggregate has $100,000, but he has over 50,000. So that's better than loaning your money to your company. So think about how that works. Now, back to John's favorite. SBIRs, Small Business Innovation Research, R&D paid for by the federal government. SBIRs were invented in the 1970s, as I recall, as a way to get money to small business. Very popular, probably not going to be X'd out by the Republicans. Okay, so how big they are depends on the agency. Some people, there's a phase 1 and phase 2. And there's a mythological phase 3 I've never seen anybody get. And so sometimes the phase 1s are 100,000, but another agency for a phase 1 is 500,000. So look around for what's out there. NSF has one of the broadest SBIRs. They're not as lucrative. DOE, Department of Transportation, and the military. They're big users of SBIRs.
Yeah, 2:30, Benjamin Cadronell from Advocacy Chiefs is going to go through a workshop on SBIR and STTR. So
Yeah.
if you want to hang around, he'll go through how to apply and what they look for in different grants.
Yeah, so that one is probably going to survive.
Today at 2:30.
Today,
Yeah,
at 2:30.
today at 2:30, probably right here.
It'll be right on here.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And customer interest in buying carbon offsets, things that reduce CO2, is still going to be out there because it's a way to avoid these penalties we've talked about. And what the ARB did Friday or the Friday before was they ratcheted down the point of neutrality. So they actually forced a lot more people to pay penalties, higher penalties, by saying, you know, the okay level was here, we're not going to put it here, for both cap and trade and low carbon fuel standard. So suddenly they're kind of forcing the market to make the credits, the offsets, more valuable.
Are railroads exempt because it's under a different administration, the railroad administration? Locomotives put an awful lot of carbon in the air because diesels have not been replaced by the fuel cell versions that will come out later on in bigger numbers.
Well, Sierra Northern Railroad has their fuel cell locomotive project.
Yeah.
It's focused on converting switcher locomotives in California, of which there are some number like 254.
Yeah.
And they're focusing on it because it's in state, and really the federal railroad regulators.
Federal.
So they're looking for switcher engines in ports and on short lines,
Yeah.
particularly for the reason I talked about. Mike Hart, yeah, he's the president of Sierra Northern Railroad. Okay, so go to customers, go to your competitors as potential partners, look at other corporates that might be interested in your product. They're willing to give you a consulting contract or a small R&D contract, but you need to start digging other places. The easy stuff, that was the Biden administration. We're now in a different climate. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, so this is talking about, it's 297 pages, I was close. So that's, Mark, what it's called. It's the new carbon neutrality scoping plan.
There's also something similar that's coming out, SB 54, it's creating a circular economy in California, making it so that producers have end-use responsibility, especially for single-use items. And that's looking at potentially having about 10 billion in grants, or 10 billion in shifted costs over the next 5 years, which could be in the form of all sorts of grants, reclamation, or any sort of project around the circular economy. So if you're trying to grab boxes and you have something in there, go and look for SB 54 groups, connect with them, because they're right now making decisions on what spending on that's going to look like.
Maybe I should talk. I'm wondering about things where you drastically increase the life of something, like a car or something like that. Or does that not fit in there at all?
Under SB 54, I don't think that would fit in there because it's specifically for producers of packaging.
Oh, okay.
But it is something when it comes to recycling and circular economy, this is probably just the start. This is what they got, we're able to get through and get through the courts and get everything to launch.
We run a competition with the Western Placer Waste Management Authority, and it's a $20,000 cash prize for ideas around the circular economy. So that will come around January is likely when we open applications.
Apply for that. Okay, because,
That's when they actually took the two top awardees in code. They gave first prize to people and invited them to set up shop on their property.
right. Right.
And here's another thing, since we talked about pitch competitions, if you're going to a pitch competition, read how they judge you and how, the criteria that they're asking for, and pitch to that criteria. If you go and you pitch, what you're working on and not to the criteria, you won't win. They gave two prizes last time, and I'd say of all the people that pitched, those were the ones that read what they were evaluating, which was on the Carlson Center's website, which was on all the stuff. When you go to apply, those were the ones that matched what they were looking for specifically.
And it is amazing on grants and pitch competitions, the people who lose almost all the time didn't say they would do anything like what the agency was giving out the money wanted. So,
No due diligence.
well, read the instructions. And the simplest way to write a grant application is you start out by looking at what it is they want you to do, and you just say, in this project, I will, and you repeat the words that they just said they wanted. Then you have to go through and justify why what you want to do actually meets that. But you'd be amazed how many people don't do that. And they say, I understand you want this thing on circular economy, but I got this really good idea on electric vehicles. This really is deserving of money, so that's why you should give me money. It's like, didn't meet the criteria. Okay.
Well, I think it ties to know your customer, right? They're identifying the need and a problem, and if you're taking that mindset not only to a competition, you're likely doing that with your customers, and you're likely wasting your time trying to fit your solution to someone's problem that they don't actually have. So I'm just thinking of if you're seeing yourself do that to check, am I also doing that in my own discovery with customers because you like they're wasting your time and money.
Yeah. So there's any number of ways you can screw this up, but try to think about reading the instructions, repeating words back to them, and staying within the page limit and the font size. They will eliminate your application if you use the wrong font. We said we wanted it in 12 point. You put it in 14 point, so you get it in there. Throw it out.
They might have 10,000 things to go through, so they might be looking for a reason just to be like, okay, didn't conform with it. Next one.
Yeah. Almost always, the first gate that you go through in submitting an application is it literally goes to a clerk. Did you exceed the maximum word limits? Did you use the right font? Did you have all the things in there that were required? If that clerk says no, nobody else looks at it. It's only the ones that say all the required elements are there that somebody with a technical background will actually pick up and read your application. So please follow the instructions.
All 297 pages of them?
Well,
I go to
that's a listing of where all the money is. Okay? Think of it as the treasure of Oak Island. Right? And you just keep digging.
Well, I heard you have to be a sick individual to do grant writing.
Maybe a little, but here's what I'll tell you about grant writing. So if you apply for a grant, you can ask them for feedback. In most agencies, they will give you feedback.
Yeah.
And you can talk with them. And sometimes they will come back and they'll say, if they have good interactions with you, they'll say listen, we didn't spend all the money. Can you change something so that we can give you the money? That happens.
Yeah. That's another good lesson is develop a relationship with your granting agency targets. Their job depends on spending the money. It's a very odd job. So they will help you.
Bring them food.
I've seen they might actually decline food because they'll be like, that's a bribe. I've seen them very much just say nope, can't.
So no bribes?
Nope, no bribes.
No obvious bribes.
There's a little envelope.
Not even a little envelope, but talk to them about their families, talk to them about their kids. You're just trying to get to know them. Okay. Now, we have in the slide presentation, and I assume we can use you to hand the thing out. I think we've got 4 examples of people that got grants.
There's other early stage funding that we kind of talked about. There's ramp funding in California. CalOSPA has opportunities you can connect with. CalSeed and CalTestBed and Rocket Fund. And of course, locally in Sacramento, there's AngelCon. And then there's also, because Gary didn't mention, there's actually phase 0 SDIR. And that's where you apply to get free help to go for your
Phase 1. Phase 0 is they help you write a phase 1 grant. Pardon? If you've never applied before.
They don't give you money, but they help you. Yeah.
So we recorded interviews of, I think, 4 companies.
Also, you can take these slides, because here's some other ones. SC Johnson is one of the foundations, Echoing Green, DKR. Cisco has a bunch of money for climate and innovative projects that can go to companies. School Foundation, PG&E has their EPIC program, which is the counter to the state's EPIC program. It's money that they can do whatever they want with around innovation and supporting the big takers.
And they got a website for that. They've listed everything they're looking for. Find a way to make it match.
My last name is Johnson, that helps me to open that.
Well,
Is your presentation here on the website?
I think we're going to send it
As
around.
long as you register it, I'll send it to you.
You got it available?
They'll send it to me and I'll send it to you.
We've got a QR code at the beginning.
Yeah.
That's so you can connect with us.
If it involves government money, what did we just say? Master all the requirements, read the instructions, take them seriously. It's lots of paperwork. An application for a federal grant is not 4 pages. It goes on and on and on. And you have to do things like get your own unique entity identifier, UEI, and you've got to have a cage code, and you've got to have a this, and you've got to have a that. You know, it sounds daunting. It's fairly easy to get all that stuff, but you got to go through and get the steps. You're going to need a team probably if you're going after a big grant. And if it's a really big grant, you need a paid grant writer. We just made you business back there. You're now going to benefit from everything you learned today. Print up some business cards and you're ready to go.
I know I can use some better stationery.
Yeah, there you go. On some grants, it's useful to have a local government or a university lead, not your company, but some other entity. So read carefully who's eligible. And a lot of them will say, individual sole proprietors can apply, but who's at the top of the list? There's a clue in who that they put at the top of the list. If they said this is for university oriented technology transfer, that's probably, you better go get a university partner. Or if it's, needs to be a community-based organization, well, who is that? It could be a housing authority. Another good one to go to that helps you a lot in getting the money is a tribe. Tribes get a lot of extra credit for you. So if you've got a woman veteran as the head of your business selling to a tribe in an economically depressed area, you already won half of the points. From that point forward, it's like, it's less important what you just said.
Another thing on that is when you're connecting with tribes and communities, you're actually doing one of the T's, team. If you're working with someone at a university, at the college, a professor, you're actually building someone that's part of your team that will help you get the validation that you need later on. So don't take it, lightly. Find ways to really engage with whatever groups you're connecting with earnestly, because they're going to become part of your team going forward.
Okay, what's the next slide? Oh, last point, be patient.
Yeah.
The government does not move quickly. There's lots of layers to get through. During this period of confusion, it may take longer than usual. And after all the secretaries get appointed and confirmed, things are probably going to go downhill from there. So be patient, but keep calling up and saying, yeah, is there any way to expedite this? So, all right. Go ahead, Thomas.
So these are just some general rules that we came up with. One is ask questions and communicate, especially if you're working going after grants. Talk with these agencies. They are part of our government and they are here to work with the constituents of the community. If you go to the CEC, the California Energy Commission, they love talking to people. And the more that you talk with them, the more you'll actually see your discussions echoed in future grants. Build partnerships. This is go further. If you want to go fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together. Connect with groups that you can work with to go after grants. Or maybe it's someone who they're going after a big grant and you're like, hey, let's be a partner. I'll do this small part of it that I'm an expert in and have a technology in, and I will help you complete your grant. If you're writing a grant, one of the things that is the hardest thing I think for entrepreneurs is you want to talk about how big your technology is, how you're going to solve everything. Well, if you solve everything, how much extra does the grant organization get? Nothing. There's only one thing that they care about, that you're going to complete what you said you're going to do. If you do more, they're super excited about it, but if you do less, that becomes kind of a problem because they get questioned about the efficiency use of funds. Write a budget reflecting when you need cash. If you have to buy capital equipment and it's a $3 million piece of equipment, don't put your disbursements evenly across the grant. Make sure it can be addressed when you need the money. And metrics you can touch. There's telling a good story, but if you have pictures, video, actual numbers, and other similar things, like we had one grant where they wanted people's first, last name, and contacting information, and they wanted us to get over 1,000 of those to prove that we were doing what we said we were doing. But those are metrics that you could touch. Another thing why we're focusing on grants right now, and a lot of people have been, we talked about past private investment in it, is a lot of the splashy investment that you see, it's thinking about, not about, is this going to make that much money, but how I can get a return based on exiting. So there's plenty of companies that haven't made money that have had giant, big, successful exits for their investors. I would honestly say most of those are not going to be clean tech companies because they're hard technologies. There's well-regulated systems that you have to go and operate in. So you typically don't see, a lot of the investment in clean tech when times are slow or even medium. What you see is the partnerships, the communities building and working on things. SMUD, which is investing in new technologies like the ESS battery system, which is a flow-back long duration storage, that hasn't been a overnight giant win for the company because it takes a lot of time and they're proving and validating it. But they've used that partnership to be able to fundraise money and grow, and they've worked on continually delivering with SMUD. So when you're going after these grants, communicate, build partnerships, because that's how you're going to go a lot farther. Be explicit and don't overpromise. Write a budget that's there and metrics you can touch.
And let me just point out this thing there. Plan to be dealing with a slow paying agency. Okay, this comes back to your cash flow. Most grants pay you in arrears. You have to spend the money up front. Then you submit an invoice. Then you get paid. Okay? Paying people up front is tough. But there are institutions that will help you with that. They're called banks. If you have, and they can see that you have a valid right to get paid, you can get a revolving line of credit. So you put an invoice to an agency under the terms of your revolving credit agreement. You may be able to pull down 80% of that fairly quickly from your revolving loan. Then when the money comes in, You pay that loan back, you take the amount of credit that you get out there back to zero, and, you know, lather, rinse, repeat. You keep doing that. But it's important that you have a way to manage how the cash is going to come in. Now, the SBIR has a program called Quick Pay, and you can get a lot of money up front. It's a dangerous opportunity because you get asked for the money and then you don't actually get the work done. Now you owe the money back, but you've already spent it. Now you're on the hook for it. This is where you lose your house. So be aware of all the ways you have to manage the cash flow. And some of it might be being creative and paying yourself. You can invoice that you've turned this amount of hours in and you've been given a check by the company. You don't have to cash the check immediately. So a lot of it is just learning those scrappy ways that you manage to stretch the money that you have and get it to fit who you owe and what priority. So don't sit there and be complacent about it. You know, hooray, I got a grant. You know, boo, I'm not going to get paid for 90 days. Are you going to cover the 90 days? Well, it's time to start thinking about that. It's probably the day that you submit the application and you start talking to banks. And who does these kinds of loans? They're almost always community business banks. The big banks consider these things not really in their wheelhouse. Identify who the community business banks are. Around here, it's Tri-Counties Bank. It's First Northern Bank. Used to be Five Star Bank, but I think they got out of business. I don't know, there's several other, they usually say community business bank. Work with those.
So we highlighted Open Grants as a place where you can go find grants and grant writers. He's local in the community, so you can connect with him personally if you have questions on it, or just go and test it out. It is worth the membership to it. And then we have on our website, and you'll use it in the slides when we share them, a couple entrepreneurs who used grants, pitching, and getting friends and family to build their businesses. One of them, Angelo Campos of Box Power. We're not going to watch, the short videos of it, but they're there in the slides. Also, we had a recent discussion with a gentleman, Jose Gallegos.
Joseph Gallegos.
Gallegos, who talked about his success with SBIR and growing with SBIR and how he built, partnerships with professors so that he would go after additional grant funding. I know a lot of people say it's hard to work with professors. Well, he doesn't seem to think so. So I bet he can go and do it too. And he worked with CSU professors, which there's a lot of them near here, I think. And Cameron can always help you get inroads with that. So with that, I'm gonna actually just probably go, let's see if I go to end without. That's all the videos before they play. And just invite you guys to come connect with us, talk more, and if you have any questions, ask them now. I think we still have some time, so we can have this.
Yeah, we have, the next session doesn't start till 2:30, so whatever
All right.
time you guys.
Any questions from what we just went over? That was a good presentation. Any questions?
You talked about like building relationships with some of these, like the CEC and like Cal Seed. Like, do you guys have forums or things to like meet them, or what?
Yes.
How might I plug into that network if I'm not?
Yeah, so with CalSeed, we always invite them at the beginning of their applications process to come and give a talk. It's usually online. Now, as it turns out, they're at the low point in their funding cycle. We're probably not going to do any of the phase 1 grants next year. We'll have to pick it up the year after, and that's just a timing thing. But we just got through the round, and I think we talked about the phase 2 grants. They were $450,000. So it looks like 5 or 6 of those are going to be awarded. But you had to be in the phase 1 in order to get to phase 2. But 250 plus 450, you have $700,000.
Yeah.
But you have to meet the criteria that CalSeed is looking for. It's not wide open. So you have to read carefully what are the funding criteria, and they change every year. But if you meet it, apply.
So we do have virtual discussions, which often have people from CalSeed, CalTestBed, the CEC. We've had people from the Air Resources Board come and talk about funding and what they're working on. Those are a good way to connect with them. There's also, we mentioned the CEC EPIC program. They have an EPIC symposium in Sacramento every year. They just had one. That's a good way to go there, listen to what they're saying, and talk with what they're investing in. Your local air district, the Sacramento Metro Air Quality Management District, or SMACT for short. It is, right in downtown, and they want to engage. Their goal is to spend money on air quality in the community. So you can go and connect with them, and they get a portion of that money, and they get to make programs that they see fit to reduce air pollution. So if you have something that can reduce local air pollution and emissions, you can talk with them. And it probably won't be the first year, but if you communicate with them and stay involved, eventually you'll start to see the discussions that you've had with them on their solicitations.
Could you please go to the slide that you had, the writers' information?
Open grants,
Yeah, previous, yes.
opengrants.io.
Yeah, we're CleanStart.org. So that's our website. And you can go through and find the resources, events, articles that we've written. And we've talked about this sort of stuff and a number.
Another way to connect,
I just found you.
Yeah.
There you go.
There's young professionals in. So if there's something that you want to work on, there's young professionals in energy, which is a great way to connect with young professionals at the CEC. There's young professionals in transit. So if you have something around transportation, you can go and connect with them. And I've seen people that are a little bit beyond young professionals at their events, but those are ways that you can go and kind of connect with them and make reoccurring I'd say touches when you're trying to build the community. Additionally, any place like that's a young professionals group or even a community group, offer to buy them pizza. Pretty much every organization has events and they love to have them catered because it's an expense that often doesn't get reimbursed through things. So offer to do it.
On that point, we do something called Power Up events, which is sort of get everybody recharged, but they're informal. They're usually held at Lucid Winery downtown. So you can imagine what we serve there. And usually have pizza, but it's quite informal. And you never know who's going to show up. I mean,
Yeah, the Carlson Center might be at the next one because it's the Christmas party. I saw you had your hand raised back there.
Yeah, I had some questions about the California Energy Commission, but also about your programming. Do you support other organizations outside of Sacramento, or is it focusing in Sacramento?
So our grants are support us in working with organizations mostly in the Central Valley. The way that I describe it is if you go and look at, there's 4 tech clusters identified by the California Energy Commission. There is the San Francisco Bay Area, there is San Diego, and there is LA, and then there's the other cluster, which is everybody else. So our work through one of our partners, Blue Tech Valley, and our work with CleanStart has us going outside the Sacramento area to support companies there and give them feedback. But primarily we are a Sacramento-based nonprofit supporting Sacramento as a clean tech hub. So does that answer the question, I guess?
Yeah, it does, because I came all the way out from San Jose and the Bay Area to go to the 10th anniversary Sustainable Groundwater Management event.
Oh, yeah.
And I came to this also.
Excellent. Well, I had the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act up there because that's one of the things that could be similar to cap and trade, but the Sustainable Groundwater Management Districts are having a much harder uphill battle in getting communities on board, which if you're curious, we're having a discussion next year around that with the Wet Center at Fresno State, talking about its impact and innovations around it. So make sure you follow us and check out what we're doing with the Wet Center next year.
Yeah, so that's on a program called Perspectives. If you look on our website under events, you'll find perspectives. So you'll see a list of the upcoming ones. And also, most of them we record and they go on our YouTube channel. So you can watch prior perspectives events. And if it was really good, we write it up as an article and you can read.
I just think, like, to that point, I think the content's super valuable, but to the point on relationships is oftentimes you miss out who's there. And so just being intentional to like join those like power up events and things of that nature, because you might get the content and the slides, but not who was there. And that's what often is going to advance the grants or those other opportunities.
We also do an in-person event. Typically it's not recorded. It's called a meetup. And usually we have a panel of speakers. And so look at the meetups, look at the topics that are coming up, come and join the ones if you can when we have those. Those are particularly valuable because you get some good social time before, during, and after. And you never know who you're going to meet there. And there have been some good connections made by people just showing up for a meetup.
Mhm.
Jerry and I were briefly chatting. You were showing me a company that's kind of fostering energy around like the growth of AI. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more energy needed to like foster that. What kind of thoughts do you all have or opportunities that you're seeing in the market for clean energy and the connection to like AI and the computing energy that's needed?
Well, honestly, so like there's a lot of hype around AI, so everyone wants to say we're going bigger, we need more and more energy. So you see these power purchase agreements that are getting somewhat a little absurd and trying to say like, oh, we're going to restart these nuclear reactors. I think you had OpenAI say that they need $1 trillion of investment. My kind of response on that is, I think a lot of those are overstated and a lot of hyperbole to get people really excited about the energy transition or about AI. And money is still going to cap what people can do on that. They're not going to get $1 trillion to buy chips to do this, because then they have to get a 3 trillion return. So that being said, there's still a lot of things that are going to drive the cost or the demand for power. One is going to be electric vehicles. I saw an article the other day that was saying, I think it was 190 terawatt hours of energy needed annually to decarbonize steel. And that's a significant amount. That's more than I think the AI transition or the AI demand is supposed to be. So the need for power at the right time, at the right place is growing. And we have a really, really old grid infrastructure in most parts of the country. We have a grid infrastructure that can be ran a whole lot smarter. And we have batteries that are now just starting to kind of come online all across the country. And then coordinating all these resources so that you get power at the right spot at the right time is going to be critical in the energy transition. And also it's an increase of efficiency. So one thing that you'll probably see with a lot of the AI is when energy is cheap, they will buy as much of it as possible. And there's going to be a lot of times during the day in different areas, especially ones that have high solar and wind saturation, where prices could go negative and they will run those chips as much as they can. But then when it gets more expensive, odds are AI will curtail itself.
Actually, just batteries.
Yeah, just
Store it, buy it cheap, store it, and then when the price goes up, use what's stored.
But coordinating these resources is going to be a big part of it, and it's a place where they still need a lot of. It's not just innovation, but also working with customers, because you have all these homes and then all retail businesses. How much flexibility do they really have? Well, individual ones only have like a small amount, but if you get them all together, you can get a whole bunch of demand response, which is what's called. To do that, you've got to get people to buy in. You have to partner with utilities, because usually they're the ones that they're going to trust to sign up on it. Or you have to, I think as, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Home Connect, give out free digital thermostats so that you potentially can enroll them in a demand response program later. There's a whole lot of go-to-market solutions that can happen around the energy transition that's about these resource coordinations. And since we're kind of on this already, there's one thing to think about is that there's the part of the grid that SMUD controls. And that's called in front of the meter. That's the power lines that you see everywhere, the one going from your house, the things that are in front of the meter on your house or on your business. And then there's behind the meter. Behind the meter is everything that you do, right? And typically, SMUD has never had a role really in what you do behind the meter. But now there's time of use rates for electric vehicles. There's other utilities are having demand response programs through Tesla Powerwalls. And all of this is utilities working with companies to reach across the meter and create programs that reduce consumption of energy when prices are high and increase storage or consumption when prices are low. So if you're looking at a solution, you need to think about where you sit, especially if it's on demand response, but where you sit relative to the customer, where you sit relative to the utility, how, where you kind of operate in it, because there's a lot of rules and a lot of things incentives that have been set up. And if you don't understand them, you'll end up working on something that, won't necessarily help or be adopted. So.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just a general thing. Never count technology out in changing the nature of the problem. So for example, we're talking about, we have an older grid. It's there's a lot of stresses and strains on it, but let's get back to the reality. Utilities have invested a lot, high voltage transmission, relatively high voltage distribution, et cetera. It's not used 100% of the time. Do you have any idea what percent of the time, on average, it's used? 30%. So when we talk about, we need to do all of this stuff, well, maybe if we just use what's already there more efficiently, and that's what he's talking about in controlling loads, controlling other sources, et cetera. But on AI, specifically, Cameron's question, I've read all the stuff about, Microsoft needs 890 megawatts to run their AI data processing center. My immediate reaction was, all baloney. We have seen the power requirements of chips go down dramatically in the past. It's going to continue to do that. I don't know whether you're familiar with the company NVIDIA, but NVIDIA makes chips for gamers. They're much more efficient, so they've got like $1 trillion valuation because they've invented these new chips, and there's more on that horizon. So there's a change in the way chips are going to be architected. One version of that is it will reduce their power consumption to less than 1% of what it's using now. So what happens to Microsoft with their 890 megawatt demand if these new chips come in? They're only going to need 10 megawatts. But there is an opportunity. Recently, a big fuel cell company called Bloom Energy has sold the whole fleet of its hydrogen fuel cells to an AI company. That one could be done, and as long as they're willing to pay the premium for that kind of power. I'm very skeptical of restarting an old nuclear plant as a way to solve the problem.
Yeah. There's a guy in Gold River who is a master system architect in MUMPS, which runs the VA hospitals and runs fidelity financial systems programs. And my thought is, I haven't really had a chance to talk about it, but what about taking and reporting from the existing software to something much more efficient and much faster, which requires much less power than today's programs?
Yeah, well, there's that. There's already plenty of people that are out there with optimization programs and just cooling the data centers. which are showing 40% energy reductions if you just be smart about it. And we grew a company here, was founded by a professor, electrical engineering, UC Davis. SnapSense. And that's what it was doing. So there's still a very deep well of inefficiency that you can build a business around eliminating. And so, don't count that out.
And in 1999, there was a prediction of power consumption for server farms to go straight off the map. And there's a big push to build power plants all across the country to support server farms. You know what server farm power consumption was from 1990 to basically 2022?
The same.
Same, just flat. All these big, yeah.
Question back here.
Yeah, I hope not about this book, but I still have a question. So how do you determine the proper valuation for business that is appropriate for both an investor and also for the business owner for it to scale bigger?
Well, valuation is a tough question. If you have a credible case for growth and a credible case for a huge market, that'll improve your valuation. But if you have a history of missing your milestones, then that tends to depress the valuation. The inexperience of your team depresses the valuation. So it's a tricky business in terms of coming up with a good valuation for a company.
The market will determine your valuation.
Well, as with many things.
The bulls and the bear spirits, yes.
It's an art. There's no formula. I know what investors look at in valuing companies, but a lot of it is just a judgment call. So if you're trying to value a company at more than 5 times your recent annual sales, you need a hell of a justification. You need to really show you're on a rocket ship to the moon in revenue, and your profitability is phenomenal, 90% profitability. That'll get you a high valuation, but it's tough to break out and get one of those. Most people get much lower valuations.
You also don't want to, you have just a huge valuation to start, it puts you in trouble because you have to continue, for your investor to continue to raise subsequent rounds, you have to continue to have that high valuation. And that's what we're currently seeing in the market is people have these exuberant valuations, and when investments slow down, they're not able to raise, and so their investors are being screwed, or they raise a down round, which no one's happy about.
Yeah.
So you want to find that right balance where it's not just, I have a huge valuation, but I'm not able to hit the milestones that demonstrate that actually.
So thinking about your investor's exit is a big portion to what you think you should be able to get.
I just want to add, Franklin, with SMUD, if you are a SMUD customer, our demand response is called Join the Charge. There is a QR code back there that you can sign up for that, and they will send you a little welcome kit for doing that. Grants is important, and one of the ways that SMUD is trying to keep our rates low is we pursue grants. We've gotten $350 million in the last 2 years to do our clean energy plan and the stuff we're doing. When Thomas is talking about how the grid is important and the interconnection with you, we got $50 million from the Department of Energy to do the next wave of smart meters, which is essentially like your iPhone attached to your house, and it has apps and other stuff. But that will do 200,000 of our 700,000 customers over the next 2 years. And that's going to allow us to have better communication with you. And you might say, hey, you can take the power out of my EV tonight. And then you might say at 1 a.m., you know what, never mind. I got called into the office. I have to drive to the Bay Area. I'm leaving at 4. Don't touch my car. That has to be real time for us to know and be able to work together. And that's where we're headed within the SMUD territory. Yes.
So I got some grants from the governor's business office, it centers around public-private partnerships. And one of my clients, they're called Global Energy, and they are a subsidiary of this trading company, high frequency trading called Global Entrepreneurship. and they actually are developing some programs like that. Your material when you talk about how even the companies that might not be based in Sacramento, could be a prime contract and subcontract. How would that work with your organization?
Yeah, so there's two papers on the back table that are what I call case studies, if you will, partnerships, different ones. They're flat flyers. So if people develop something, this is why SMUD is a sponsor of this week and why we're involved with startups and the ecosystem, is we need innovation. We need ideas. There are things that we see that are useful to SMUD. We partner or pilot them and check them out. Two in the back, Thomas mentioned ESS batteries, iron flow, long storage battery, long life cycle. We can cycle it a lot because we're going to do that a lot. Huge purchase. Part of the leverage of that purchase was, hey, that's a great product. We want to do it. We want to do it here. It's not from here. We said, well, we'll do a bunch of it. Part of the deal needs to be you're going to create a training facility and jobs here in Sacramento to maintain and operate those batteries. And so that was part of the leverage, the economic development piece of it that we got by making a large early purchase with them or an agreement to purchase more. The second case study over there is On-Site Technologies, startup here in the region, now headquartered in Folsom. They originally developed a robot that checks, has a high-def camera and an infrared camera that does heat sensing that can look at the back connections on solar panels. Their second product is called the OWL. That's what we're going to pilot with those batteries. It searches and is early detection for any kind of fire. Any puff of smoke, it detects it. It will send a little video directly to the facility manager and he can see what that sees. So again, something useful to us. We're going to pilot that. That's a brand new pilot we just did about 2 months ago and we'll be doing over the next year. But it's something that's useful to us. It mitigates risk. A lot of fire departments very nervous about batteries. Even though these are not lithium ion batteries that have a bigger fire issue, but it's a way for us to mitigate that, make them feel better and make our insurer feel better about what we're doing when we're going into something new, right? So, and we're able to do it with somebody in our backyard that's a startup company and then I've got 40 employees, so great for the region.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of our allotted time. So thank you very much for your attention, your participation. Hope you got something out of it. Cameron?
Awesome. Well, just wrapping up, we have our next session at 2:30. So if you want to learn more about the SBIR STTR program, we'll have Benjamin Cazanelli has a program through the city of Sacramento, and then we're also expanding it in the region for those that want to prepare to actually apply for SBIR. So it'll be a great resource to connect it, and he'll be kind of going through some of the blocking of that program. So that will be at 2:30 in this space, so feel free to hang out.
So I need to start a grant team.
Appreciate you all being here.
Even if it's informal.
I tried it and it's.
You need some people that can.
I'm gonna go, I'll be right back. I'm gonna turn the live.
You know, more brains.
On it virtually earlier too.
I sent.
No.